Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to Sit and See Live. I'm Dr. Jared Jones. My research specialties were ancient systems of meditation, the cognitive science of meditation, Buddhist philosophy, and the philosophy of science. I've been a Buddhist for about 20 years, training in pretty traditional, serious environments, and also a Taoist practitioner for another 5 or 6 thereabouts. I'm on a bit of a mission to help people understand how to train in meditation, both relying a bit on the science and about a decade on and off teaching people how to train in meditation as lay people living in the real world. And Sit and See is about bringing people together from whatever your background happens to be and hopefully helping you train in techniques that are really effective in the midst of real life, not simply effective in the context of being an intensive retreat, which is what most of the texts on these subjects are written for. Um, yeah. So where am I getting these ideas? Where am I getting these techniques? I'm getting them from a number of different places. The system that I teach, I've built in pieces from a number of different systems that I've trained in. So, for example, intensive breath meditation comes from my primary teacher who had 30 years in Zen practice and uh, another 20 something years in Tibetan practice. The body scanning practices come through partly the Thai forest tradition and partly the Chinese internal martial arts tradition, and partly some other Buddhist things that I'm not going to talk about. And then the Mahamudra system that I teach comes through the Geluk tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. And then finally, the rumination system, how it is that you transform the content on the surface of your mind, comes from the Geluk system as well. So all of these have pretty good lineage, pretty good lineage sort of criteria, you could say. They're well established in various lineages that are known to produce good results. But then in addition to that, I've stacked them in such a way that and stacked them and added details to them in such a way that they'll be very, very effective in the midst of real life, not just if you were in intensive retreat, which is really the point, you know? Most of us are not going to spend our lives in intensive retreat. I hope that some of you do. I hope, there's a documentary I'm going to be probably incorporating into a video that I'm doing very soon about a Western gentleman who spent years traveling around the Himalayas and training with great yogis and gurus and things in the Himalayan mountains. And he has a wonderful interview that's up on YouTube now that I happened to stumble across. And it's the stuff of it's the stuff of legend. It's just going from cave to cave, from master to master, training in the most sophisticated techniques available in the Tibetan corpus. It's a really incredible story. But for most of us, that's not going to be our life. So we need some techniques that work in the middle of us living real lives in the real world, doing real stuff. Okay, having finished clearing my throat, welcome Oats. Good to see you again. Earth, glad to have you. Sweet and sour, good to see you again. Jay, hello, hello. So today I was thinking we might do some standing practice. That's why we're oriented this way instead of with my back to the wall over here. Earth says there's a bit of a heat wave going on. Yeah, that's true. That's true. There's been some very strange weather. Uh, Gaming says, long live the wall. I don't know the wall. uh, so welcome, welcome everyone who's here. Let me check the stream from a different channel. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Normally I don't look at normally I don't look at how it's coming in on YouTube. I just look at it on my streaming service. God, the quality's so spotty by the time it gets to YouTube. That's crazy. Right. Well, in any case, my friends, welcome to the stream. Um, we're going to be doing some standing practice today, but before we do, my usual thing is to have people ask questions. So whatever questions you have about your personal meditation practice, please do please do at this time let me know what questions you have. Some of you, of course, have been training with me for a while, and you have questions directly related to the practices that I teach. But if you're not actually doing my systems, that's okay. You may have questions about practice more generally from training and other things, and that's just fine by me. Um, I'm not territorial, and in fact, I hope people will train in other things and become competent in the systems that they're in. That's part of why I'm doing what I do. Okay. Well, since we don't have a lot of questions coming in, I think what I'll do is say a few things of my own. I've had a couple conversations over the last 2 days that made me realize that maybe I haven't been very clear with Foundation One. I thought I was pretty clear, but maybe I haven't been clear enough because I had talked to two different people who said, I'm doing Foundation One exactly the way you described. Exactly the way you described. And I go, great, tell me what you're doing. And they go, well, I'm sitting for 30 minutes and I'm placing my mind on my breath and I'm not counting and I'm just following my breath. And I go, that has nothing to do with what I'm teaching. That sounds nothing at all like the technique that I teach. So, Foundation One, and I will get to your questions in the chat. I'll come to your questions in the chat. But Foundation One is a 5 minute intensive practice. This is if you were working out your body instead of your mind, this is the equivalent of powerlifting for 5 minutes with maximum weight. Unless when you place your mind on the breath, unless all four of your other sensory powers turn off completely, and unless every other part of your body disappears, and the only thing in the entire universe that exists is the breath and the counting, then you haven't accomplished this practice. Have I been clear enough now? I really hope that I have. This is not an easy thing to do. If absolutely anything else whatsoever appears, if you hear something, if you smell something, if you taste something, if you feel the rest of your body, if a thought occurs and you're aware a thought has occurred, you've lost the object. The only thing that's appearing is the breath and the counting. If anything whatsoever appears whatsoever of any kind for any duration, you're not doing intensive breath. You're trying to do intensive breath. And therefore, if when you place absolutely every ounce of your attention and grit, right, every bit of grit you have into trying to keep every bit of your bandwidth of attention right here and it goes somewhere else, and then you say, well, I'm really getting this thing going now, I'm going to do 30 minutes of this, man, have you missed the point. You have massively, massively missed the point. This practice is meant to teach you how to take the entire bandwidth of your mind and cram it into one tiny little area so that all of the mind is there. So if the rest of you is still appearing, you haven't accomplished this practice yet. Now, are you going to be able to do that next Tuesday? No. Do you need to be able to do that before you do body scanning? No. But that's where this practice is heading, where the only thing that exists when you place the mind on that patch of skin is that patch of skin. From the subjective point of view, everything else should disappear. If all the bandwidth appears here, everything else should stop happening. No seeing, no hearing, no smelling, no tasting. The rest of your body should go away. From subjective experience, all that should be gone. If it's not, then you're not taking enough force to pull everything in, right? There's parts of your mind that are still busy producing other images, other sensory experiences, etc. It's not, your attention hasn't pooled anywhere. Now, when you're doing this training, you have to think about it in terms of degrees, because in the beginning it's not going to happen. But maybe you can get 50% of your attention there, and that's a significant little bit of ringing for, oh yes, sorry, okay, a little bit of that should be better now, I think. So if you can get yes, yes, yes. So if you can, hopefully the sound will be better on the mic now. I just changed it a bit. So if you can get the attention here and you can get 50% of the bandwidth or 60%, and then maybe the other senses start to gray out, and maybe the rest of your sensory experience becomes less, right? Okay, great. You're on your way. But if that hasn't happened, then you're still in the process of needing to apply maximum effort to pull everything in. And if you're not struggling, deeply struggling, intensely struggling to pull the awareness into this place, then you're not struggling against the tendency of mind to generate all this stuff out of control. You understand? So it's really important to understand this practice and what it means to accomplish this practice. It means that literally everything else disappears and the only thing that exists is the counting and the breath. That patch of skin and the counting. If that hasn't happened, then you haven't accomplished the practice yet, which is fine. This is extremely difficult to do. And you don't have to have accomplished this practice to do body scanning and make the concentration deeper. You just need to be able to get, I don't know what number, 60%, 70% of your attention to stay here without running away. That's a pretty good start. And then you can start doing body scanning, and the mind will become more calm, more focused, and you'll start building up these capabilities over time. But don't forget what the purpose of this activity is. It's to learn how to get all of the bandwidth of your attention in one place. Hey, Brock, welcome. Okay. So this isn't a practice for developing the entire process of training and meditation. This is a practice for specifically bringing all of the bandwidth into one place, which is addressing the first two steps of training and meditation. That's it. It's not meant to address all of the problems. It's not meant to take you all the way down the path. So, um, yeah, please bear that in mind. The 5 minute intensive breath is 5 minutes of intensive practice. If you want to do it more of that practice, then do two sessions. Do one session, take a break, and then do another session, like interval training at the gym. You do 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off, 5 minutes on, 5 minutes off, and you could do that for an hour if you want, and that'd be very effective. That's a useful practice, but probably because what I'm asking you to do is quite demanding, that's going to be difficult to do. That's not going to be an easy. Already this is going to be quite difficult to do, right? So, okay, I don't want to belabor the point. Let me get into the questions. Earth Wombat says, can't find the point of tension in my body that's making my neck move from side to side. Yeah, I'm not quite sure how your neck is moving. Um, but try not to focus on it too much, right? If you're doing body scanning, you're not modifying what's there. You're just scanning the body and you're becoming aware of what's there without adjusting it. So if your mind is getting wrapped up in trying to adjust stuff or make things different than you're seeing it, now your mind is in the process of chasing things again. Yeah. So Earth is saying at the bottom of the chat that something might be so tight that you don't notice anymore. That's part of what happens. Like my shoulder is really bad and has been for a long time, and there are certain things that have been tight for so long, like these little muscles or whatever. To exaggerate, it's kind of like this, that I can't even feel that they're not in the right position. This feels normal. Like even holding it here artificially feels like, ah, yes, this is where this is supposed to be, because my entire body has readjusted itself so that this is where it should be to balance out everything else. And so when I release it to where it should be, it feels totally weird. It feels like I'm going like this. So, yeah, some of you will have the experience if your body's messed up that you get the back in the right position and it feels like you're going like this, or it feels like you're going like this, or it feels like you're going like this, or whatever, because the body is in the wrong position all the time. Yeah. This is why standing can really help, because standing, especially if you have a mirror to look into, to see what the body's actually doing, can really help you figure out what's going on with your posture, make it better, make the body stronger, and then when you go to sit down, the body's in a better position than it would have been otherwise. Jay asks, I was meditating the other day and some light was coming in behind me, which cast shadows of my body that looked exactly like a stupa. Oh, that's cool. On this point of stuff releasing while you're doing body scanning, there are what's called Neigong practices that are in the Lohan course, which some of you have already heard about. So I don't teach Neigong, but one technique of Neigong is you would stand in that standing posture, for example, the one that we're going to do today, and instead of just becoming aware of this area, like let's say that this area that my hand, as an example, like if it was my shoulder, we'll pretend that my hand is my shoulder. Okay, so let's say that my shoulder was really tense, like this, right? So one type of the body scanning practice, you would just come through like this, become aware of it, and move on, and you don't change anything. You just keep going. Neigong, there are other things you might do. So I might come through here, stop for a second, release the extra tension, and then move to the next part, release the extra tension there, move to the next part, release the extra tension there, and so on and so forth. So the internal skill, the Neigong, right, is being able to go in and make that area change in a specific way that you want it to change, or a number of other skills you might sort of do for Neigong. In any case, there are skills like this that you do uh, in Tai Chi and Bagua, Xingyi. I'm assuming also. I haven't studied it at great depth, but Lohan is primarily an internal Chinese martial art, so I'm assuming it also has Neigongs of these kinds. Otherwise, I don't know how you'd learn it to generate the types of forces that you need to do internal martial arts. So yeah, there are techniques where you combine the two, body scanning and various sorts of release practices, but that's not something that I teach. Okay, Obama says they stumble with the counting. So Earth is asking, what if you naturally release? So when you go through, that is something that will happen. That just by becoming aware of an area, it will release. So even if you don't do a Neigong to make it release, sometimes just bringing you the awareness there, you become aware that there's tension, and because you're not doing anything, and that tension is a type of doing something, it just dissolves because that part of that unconscious thing that you're doing now becomes a conscious thing that you're doing, and you stop doing it. If that makes sense. In other words, it would take mental effort for you to keep doing it because now you've noticed that it's happening and it's something that has to actually be consciously done at some level. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously not during your body scan. You don't want to do a self massage, but this is another thing that's part of Lohan. They have a whole system for self massage for Lohan practice. Yeah, so I mean, all these details are there, and they do help make your body better for meditation. Okay. Uh, Rock says that he stumbles with counting. Yeah, the counting makes it harder. The counting makes it harder, but it also makes it easier to keep your attention on the task. The task is to count and to follow this patch of skin, the breathing on this patch of skin, right? So the task has two parts. So the task is part of one activity, one thing that you're doing. But without the counting, you're going to find that you think you're staying on the breath, but the mind starts running all over the place, and you don't notice until way later that it started running around. And so, if you do the count you'll get to two or three, and then the mind will start running around, and then you'll remember that you're supposed to be meditating, and you'll go, "Wait, what number was I on?" And it gives you more feedback as to how long you've been gone, how far you've fallen out of the state of concentration you were generating, et cetera, et cetera. So the counting adds another layer of feedback on how you're doing with keeping your attention on the activity. So, as I sometimes say, if it's a bit too difficult to do if it's a bit too difficult to visualize the numbers, that's okay. Then uh, you can do something besides visualizing the numbers, like saying them loudly inside your mind, which I recommend doing anyway. Hold on, I'm going to take this thing down. Uh, so you can do that sort of thing. And if you have a really hard time visualizing things in general, some people don't have a very good visualization type of mind. Then just do the counting with words. Just say the words in your mind, and you say them loudly and forcefully. Okay, all right. I've been using mala to count the breath. Seems to lock me in, says Jay. The only reason I wouldn't recommend that is this: you're trying to get the attention to pool here. If you're using a mala, you have to bring part of your attention out of the activity to here, find a bead, and move it with the hand. So you're taking part of the bandwidth of your awareness, and you're holding the mala without the mala moving from a particular position. So part of the bandwidth has to be here. Also, I teach very, very little on visualization, but visualization is a very important skill for certain techniques that come later on in most meditative systems. So even though it's hard to visualize, it's worth in this early stage trying to visualize the numbers. They don't have to be clear. They don't have to have a ton of detail. The texts literally say if the meditation object seems like it's in a fog, but you can basically make out what it is, that's fine. This happens because your mind is not super lucid yet. Your mind is not very bright and lucid. So the object doesn't appear that it generates doesn't appear very clear and sharp. You can't fix that by just trying to make it more clear and sharp. You just have to deal with the fact that it's cloudy and maintain the general characteristics. And you're only visualizing it for a second or two, so it's not that big of a deal. Wombat's asking about the position of the tongue. Um, so this is another thing I don't make a huge deal of in the beginning because unless you have some capability or some other stuff is happening, it's not that important in the beginning. Yeah. Okay, we'll get back to the numbers. Just put in the chat some of the stuff that's happening. I'll comment on it briefly. So when you're um, placing the tongue, if this is my front teeth, right? If these are my front teeth and this is my palate, then the palm of my hand here is there's like a ridge at the front of the mouth. And so you take your tongue like this and you place it on that ridge right behind the two front teeth. So like this. And yet the tongue is very relaxed. It's just the tip is just barely reaching up and touching this central that ridge behind the teeth. And there's a bunch of reasons for this. One is that if you were to sit for a long time and you actually entered a state of concentration, which is not the problem you have now, if you were to do this, then your saliva builds up as you sit for 3 or 4 hours, and you'll start drooling if you don't have a place for the saliva to go. Another reason is that how to say, if you have I was talking to my dentist about this actually. It's funny you say that, Jay, because I was talking to my dentist about this, and yeah, I mean, mewing would mean that you take your whole tongue, like this is the roof of your mouth, you take your whole tongue and you move it up like this, and it makes this look tighter somehow, which people like for photos. But that's not what you're doing. So the base of the tongue stays where it is, and you just reach the tip up, and it touches that ridge behind the front teeth. So you're not going like this, which is mewing. You're just going like this, and you touch the tip of the tongue to that ridge, and there's kind of a bump. uh, So when you are, how do I explain this? Having your tongue raised, according to my dentist, which I thought was kind of interesting, he said that when you raise your tongue like this and it touches the roof of your mouth, it actually makes all of your jaw muscles and stuff relax. And so he recommended this for general sort of general health of the jaw and stuff, which I found kind of interesting. So your teeth are slightly apart, your lips are together, or you can have a tiny gap in the lips, but very small. Lips are together, generally speaking. The teeth are apart, and on the back of the palate, the tongue rests right here on that on there's usually like a little bump on that ridge, sort of in the middle behind the two front teeth here. So right here, the tip of the tongue rests there. So the reason I don't talk about that in the beginning is because it's distracting. It's distracting to hold your tongue there, and when you're trying to put 1,000% of your being into just getting the mind here, I prefer not to introduce all of the other elements that might help with meditation stuff later on. But when you're doing body scanning and you're doing the rest of the practices, especially once you get to some stuff later on in these systems, it's beneficial to have the tongue in that position. And if you're going to sit for a really long period of time, there'll be less times where you have to swallow your saliva if the saliva can collect below your tongue instead of collecting on the top of your tongue, which is part of the reason you raise your tongue, because then you have a big hollow area for the saliva to collect. I don't know that it's so precise. It doesn't have to be like the exact refined tip or something. It's just sort of the general front area of the tongue, whichever part, when you comfortably reach it up, touches just behind the teeth. Okay, yeah. So oats, that's a really good thing. Um, when you read the text on visualization and they're talking about visualizing stuff, it says in the beginning, you can't add all the details. There's no way you're going to be able to keep track of all the details. Your mind simply can't do it. But it says that what will happen is it's going to change color, it's going to change shape, it's going to change location, and it's going to change in number, meaning that if it's one thing you're visualizing, it'll become multiple things. So it's going to move. So for example, spinning or twitching or moving to different parts, that's going to happen. It will change size, it will get bigger and smaller, it will change colors. So visualizations are really good once you have some concentrations that's already relatively stable. You can use visualizations to refine your capability in concentration to be much more refined because the details change because your mind changes. And so you can get a really good gauge on how stable your mind is being based upon how much the image is moving and changing and how sharp it is. And so, like visualization, really fantastic for developing the later stages of meditation. I would say stages like 6 through to the end of the process. Although even for that, I think, you know, at least it's just my own preference that meditating on consciousness itself is maybe, at least to my predisposition, is a little bit better. Because then you're meditating on the thing that generates all of reality, which is much more interesting than something you've imagined. Okay. All right, friends. Let's get to some practice so that I don't just talk the whole time, as has been happening. How's that looking? That's too far down now. Brilliant. Okay, friends. Is that a new question or just a comment? Carrie Kane. I don't know who Carrie Kane is. Okay, so for standing meditation, I'm actually going to go through the process a little bit more detail today. So look at my feet. You don't want to be like this. You don't want to be like this. You want the feet, if you look at the insides of my feet, to be facing forward, right? So it's as if my feet are on railroad tracks. They're parallel if you're following the inside. Next, knees. You don't want your knees locked out like this, right? Your knees are going to be bent. And watch my torso when I bend my knees. See how my torso ends up shifting forward if you look behind me? If I do it fast, see? So when you bend the knees, the weight shifts forward, which then places the weight over this part of the foot, basically right here. You don't want to be up here on the toes and the ball. That's too far forward. You want to be about here, just behind the ball of the foot, or at the front of the heel, one of the two, depending upon how worn out your legs are. The reason for this is that when you bend to that degree, it slightly stretches the feet, and it slightly stretches the calves, and it slightly stretches once you put weight in the middle like this. You put weight in the middle as if there's a big weight hanging from the perineum. Another way to think about it is you're sitting on a bar stool like this. So when you sit on the bar stool and the weight hits between the toes, you'll feel the front of the thighs stretch slightly. So what we've done is we've stretched this, we've stretched this, we've stretched this, and then you're sitting on those stretched things instead of just relying on the muscles. You're sitting on the stretchiness of your own tissue, which makes it easier to stand. And it allows blood to flow more easily and has a bunch of health benefits. Okay, so that's the posture of the legs and the hips. Now, the lower back should be here. You don't want to be leaning forward. You don't want to be leaning back. And a lot of people do actually stand kind of like this, believe it or not. And you look at yourself in a mirror, this is straight up, but it feels like you're leaning forward at first. So basically, lean forward slightly and you'll be standing up straight, unless you've already been doing a lot of this. Next, your chest, you don't want it artificially raised up like this. You don't want to be peacocking, right? You let the chest relax into a natural position. The shoulders are a bit more complicated, but I got a wonderful tip from a chiropractor once. If you take your thumbs, turn them downwards, and then move them outward, keep your elbows locked to the side of the body and move them outwards like this. And then you just sort of shimmy the shoulders a little bit and relax them until they fall down into the sockets. Then your shoulders will be pretty much where they should be all the time, even though even though they're rarely in that position. Okay. So then from here, just take the hands and you'll take the hands and just place them not here and not here, but if you relax the arms, they should actually come to about 45 degrees on the thigh. Instead of having a limp noodle hand and instead of going like this, you're just going to put barely enough life in the hand that it stretches open ever so slightly. And this, once again, is like your foot, so that it has a bit of that stretchy feeling to it, which then connects. If you touch the thighs here, you'll feel that the arm actually slightly stretches just like the legs. And since you have a slightly stretched foot, calf, thigh, spine, shoulder, bicep, forearm, hand, you've now connected up the whole body as one stretchy unit. And that makes it easier to stand and has a bunch of health benefits as well. Okay, last bit is the neck. So with the neck, don't pull your head backwards. Just use the joint at the top of the neck. For those of you who have done my meditation stuff, you know exactly where that is. You're just going to basically drop the chin ever so slightly, just rotating on that upper joint without doing anything else with the rest of the neck. And then the neck will be in the right position. So now here we are, finally standing, hands slightly stretched open, feet slightly stretched open, the weight on the just behind the balls of the feet. And you should feel, even with just this much, you should feel that almost like the body it's relaxed, but there's a slight stretch to the whole body. And if you bounce like this, you should feel that the whole body sort of it has a bouncy feeling. Yeah, that's the right feeling. Okay, so now in this position, we'll start the body scanning meditation. So place the attention in the, we're going to do it more like a Negong style. So we'll do both feet at the same time. So start with the toes on both feet, balls of the feet, the arch and the top of the feet, the heels, ankles, the lower half of your calves, the upper half of your calves, into both hips, the front of your pelvis, the back of your pelvis. Find the tailbone, anus, perineum, sexual organ. Slide back across the organ to the tailbone, up the sacrum to the waist, and be aware of the back of the waist, front of the waist. Now, the middle of the trunk, what I call the diaphragm belt. So become aware of the back of the diaphragm belt, the front of the diaphragm belt, the back of the chest, front of the chest, top of your left shoulder, and your right shoulder at the same time, the fronts of your shoulders, sides, the back, and the armpits, bicep area, elbows, forearms, wrists, palms, and the back of your hands, and the first joint of your fingers, second joint of your fingers, third joint of your fingers, fingertips, now the bottom third of the neck, middle third, upper third, back of your scalp, left side, right side, left ear, right ear, forehead, left eyebrow, left eye, right eyebrow, right eye, nose, left cheek, right cheek, upper lip, lower lip and chin. Now your top lip, your bottom lip, the skin inside your mouth, teeth, roof of your mouth, below your tongue, and your tongue. Follow the tongue from the tip to the throat, and then be aware of the throat. Bring the awareness up through the throat to the top of the head and be aware of the top of your scalp. Feel around on the top of your scalp now. If there's a place that's more sensitive or where you feel more sensation, let the attention come to rest there. Otherwise, just bring it to the back third of the scalp in the middle and let it rest on that general area. And from that area, pull it down to both of your hands and become aware of top of the head, both hands. Stretch it down again to both feet and become aware of top of the head, both hands, both feet. 5 points. Now from here, we're going to transition to walking meditation. So don't shake out your legs. Don't wiggle your legs. Don't wiggle your body. Your body is going to feel different than it did before you did the standing practice. That's totally normal. It's totally normal to have tingling sensations in the feet and the legs. Just leave it as it is. Keep the awareness in the 5 points and start your walking meditation. So, for this practice, if you need to move at this speed to maintain the same degree of concentration on the 5 points that you had when you were standing still, then move at this speed. And anytime you find that the mind has lost the 5 points and it takes you more than a second or two to reestablish it, then just stop. reestablish the awareness of the 5 points, and then start walking again. And probably go a little slower than you were going so that you don't lose that 5 point awareness. Okay. As you get better at this, you'll be able to move a little bit faster. If you can't move as fast as I'm moving today, that's totally fine. I've been doing this for a couple of weeks, so I'm okay at this, believe it or not. And eventually, you'll be able to move at full speed. And besides the fact that I look like a horror movie walking around in a circle in my own room, in the privacy of my own home, despite that fact, when I go out in public and I'm doing 5 points meditation, it doesn't look like I'm doing anything. So, in the privacy of your own home, where it's not embarrassing, you can learn to make this meditation so powerful, so seamless that you can maintain 5 points, then it doesn't look like you're doing anything in particular. And then you can really start to take this practice on the road, and you can do it anytime you happen to be walking anywhere, as long as you're not crossing the street or doing something dangerous. And then you should fully pay attention to what you're doing and not just keep your awareness in the body. So walk at whatever speed you need to. If you lose the 5 points for more than a couple seconds and you can't bring it back, then switch. Then go back to standing until you've reestablished it, and then carry on walking. And only go as fast as you can. Only go as fast as you can go while maintaining the 5 points. Okay. Questions? Looks like Sorav Singh asked if standing meditation is good for older people. Yeah, it is. Standing practice in general is something that's taught in the Chinese health arts, in particular, as longevity practices. So they, because you're relying on the stretchy tissue to hold you up, that tissue can stay healthier as you get older. You can keep that tissue nice and elastic and strong and keep everything moving the way it should. Standing practice would be part of a number of other things you would do. But yeah, it's right in there with the other health practices because it increases blood flow and makes your structure really strong. And how to say, you would want to combine it with a few other things to keep things moving. But it's definitely part of the longevity practice systems of all of the internal art practices that I've seen coming out of China. I'm sure you've seen older people standing and doing qigong stuff like this, right? Or like this, or all sorts of different postures. So yeah, there are benefits. So Jay, it depends on what kind of work you do. So if you worked in a factory, for example, around heavy machinery, or on a farm with heavy machinery, or whatever, don't do this. Don't just pay attention to what you're doing, because I want you to keep all of your limbs and your digits. If you're taking a bunch of the bandwidth of your attention and putting it into a practice like this while you're doing something where you have the potential to get maimed permanently for life, the chances of you getting maimed permanently for life go up, not down. So you wouldn't want to do it if you're in a potentially dangerous environment. If you're in a safe environment at work, like, I don't know, if you're working at a hospital visiting patients and you're walking from one room to the next, for example, you can generate well, Wombat can tell you because Wombat is a medical student in, I won't say where, but is a medical student. And we've talked about this a bit, which is that not just with 5 points meditation, but with opening the sense gates, one of the things that happens is your mind is it's getting a lot more rest between more active kinds of activities, and it's able to take in a lot of information while someone's talking, for example, or while you're looking at something. So if you're looking at a patient, for example, you're able to, for lack of a better term, sort of behold the situation without yet accessing the information you know about it. And one of the interesting things that happens is, and Wombat was telling me this, when he first started doing opening the visual gate and the auditory gate while talking to people, it was a strange experience because the normal thoughts that would have been there, tracking the conversation and blah, 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 you know, seems to go away. But then all of a sudden he noticed that he just knew what to say in the conversation, that the information he needed just arrived when it was time to talk. And so, yeah, there's this kind of strange paradox of as you get more sort of conceptual noise out of the way, the conceptual stuff that comes up when you need it tends to be quite good. Like right now, there's very little conceptual content in my mind, but mouth is still going like this. So it's interesting. It's. removing a lot of that extra noise makes your mind sharper and better. Hey Hans, welcome. Um, yeah, 5 points will be good, Jay. 5 points will be good. What will be great is when you can open the six directions and just abide on the entire body as the object. And then furthermore, because if you're dealing with patients and you need to be able to see what's happening, you need to be able to hear what's happening, opening the visual field so that you take in the entirety of the field without the mind becoming disturbed, distracted, etc., and opening the auditory field so that you're hearing what's happening without the mind being sort of pushed away from or pulled in by what's occurring. It's just aware of what's occurring. I think I anticipate. I don't know. I'd be really interested to see like a longitudinal study done on this, but I anticipate that being able to do that with your mind would reduce fatigue because the part of the what makes the mind tired is that it's sort of being pulled back and forth by the stuff that it likes or is interested in and it's pushing away or not interested in. And especially I think in medicine where the stakes are quite high, uh, there's a great deal of stress there about getting it right and so on and so forth, which is important. Of course you do need to get it right as best you can, but having them being able to open the mind, open the sensory gates. Yeah, it's in the course materials. This is called Mahamudra. Opening the sensory gates means that you can take in a huge amount of information without the mind getting disturbed by what it's seeing. So just as an example, I use this as an example sometimes. It works fairly well. Try to follow my finger, okay, on the screen as best you can. Like this is not easy, right? Now, instead of following my finger, place your awareness on the edges of the screen so that you're taking in the entire screen. You ready? Now watch. You see everywhere my finger goes, but your mind doesn't have to move around to do it. Did you notice? So, likewise, if you can learn how to zoom out so that the entire visual field becomes the object of meditation, you can take in the entirety of the visual field without the mind having to run around inside that field from object to object to object, which is a much more relaxing way of engaging with your experience if you can do it. Same thing with the auditory field. In medicine, there's a lot of beeps and boops and alarms and people yelling and so if you can open up that field so that the mind isn't disturbed by what's appearing there, and if someone's in front of you and they're screaming, if there's somebody screaming on this image, it's the same as if someone's telling you, I love you, you're wonderful. It's just an image. So the mind can stay perfectly concentrated and in a lovely condition regardless of what appears on this screen. As long as it's not zooming in and becoming involved in, you know, I'm in this part now, right? So if you can keep the mind zoomed out and in this condition, I think you can reduce fatigue, mental fatigue and emotional fatigue. Furthermore, when you get to rumination meditation is about being able to control what appears on the surface of the mind, to put it broadly. So, big thing they talk about in medicine is burnout. So if you have more emotional, first of all, if you can zoom out so that the mind is in a calmer condition most of the time and the information you need is more available because there's less mental noise, that's really helpful. Another thing that's really helpful is if you can control the emotional content and the emotional content that occurs there is something you've practiced that's functional, helpful for you and your patients, right? Well, now I think the potential for burnout is less, and the potential for a medical professional to bring better stuff to the table is more. And I'd love to see some studies done on this. You know, emotional baggage needs organization. Yeah, but not just organization. There's like all sorts of emotional stuff we do that just needs to be totally like needs to be thrown out the window. It just doesn't work. So just as a small example, this is not a short-term solution, Jay, but as a long-term solution, and for Wombat too, since you're in medicine, this sounds, yeah. So this sounds totally insane, probably, but when you're training in meta and you're training in meta for real, and you're not just training in goodwill, and there's a lot of goodwill practices that have the name meta in the modern world, but they're not meta actually. When you train in meta for real, you have to spend a long time making the categories of beings of different kinds of beings equal, so that your category for the ones that are doing things that harm you has an equality with the ones you don't know, has an equality with the ones who have helped you a lot that you really like. And you do this until the attitude completely equalizes between these groups. How you treat them is not the same, but the attitude you have, the baseline attitude is the same. So the indifference goes away, the aversion goes away, and the inappropriate grasping goes away in regards to the ones you're close to. It doesn't mean you don't feel intimate. You do feel intimate with the close ones, but there's inappropriate types of closeness that would make you do things that are quite horrible, actually, and those go away. So by equalizing these three, that process could take you a few years. It's very difficult to do. It takes a lot of work. I know someone who did that work for about 4 years before they started trying to do meta. Yeah, exactly right. So when you're going through how to expand love, Jay, I mean, you'll go, oh wow, yeah, this is a project, right? So you use rumination to build that actual feeling of equanimity. And then you use rumination to build the next layer on top, and then the next layer on top until you have genuine concern for how it turns out for all beings, to put it in colloquial terms, that you really do care how it turns out for everyone. You want it to go well for everyone. You want everyone to have the best possible outcome, and you're not forcing that anymore. That's like the only rational response to the world. It's the only thing that makes sense. You're not brute forcing it and going, no, I should love my enemies or something. No, you legitimately go, the one who's harming me absolutely must have the best possible outcome. And that's the only rational response to that person. Even if I have to punch them in the gut, that's still the attitude I have while doing that, is that they must have the best possible outcome, no matter what. Which maybe sounds funny, but it's actually not a joke. So you can imagine if you could generate this extremely powerful, overwhelming, all-consuming feeling that it must turn out well, as best I'm able to contribute to this, it must turn out well, and I'll take personal responsibility to have it go as well as possible for each being. That this provides a lot of extra energy to the situation of providing care, I would imagine, you know? Because I mean, in a sense, I provide care. It's not medical care, but I'm helping people work with their minds and the negative emotions they have and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of floppy techniques out there that don't do anything. You know, the visualization of hugging your enemies doesn't have anything to do with with believing from the depths of your bones that the only rational response to someone who's harming you is that the very best possible outcome must be theirs under with absolute conviction, right? Just hugging somebody, whether in your imagination or in real life, doesn't accomplish that mental state at all. And I can't even find a connection between those two things. Like those, I don't see how those two are connected actually. So developing equanimity, developing loving kindness, developing what we call compassion, karuna, mahakaruna, these are not easy things to do. These are actually this is the work of experts, of highly capable meditators who work with themselves over a long period of time. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do the work, you should. But again, I think these sorts of ruminations have tremendous potential value for medical professionals. Um, in their secular forms, for those who aren't Buddhist in particular, there's great potential there, because these mental states give you a lot of endurance, a lot of willpower. And it's a mature kind of willpower. It's not a naive sense that, oh, yeah, like I'm going to be crushed if it doesn't turn out well. No, it has nothing to do with me. It must turn out well for them. This is my conviction. I will do everything it takes to make it turn out well for them, but I have no attachment whatsoever to the outcome. So on the one hand, you have complete sort of it's not involved with you at all. And on the other hand, it is completely involved and intimate in the best possible sense in the situation. So the negative aspect of, oh, I feel depressed because it didn't go well goes away. And the positive aspect of, I'm going to do whatever I can to help stays and is very powerful, right? And is maximized. So I think this has medical applications, but so with regards to enemies, enemies are very difficult. And you don't start there. You start by making the categories equal. You start by making the categories equal and you work with friends and strangers. And then once those feel equal, then you work with the enemies. And it's a pretty logical process. It helps to do it a bit with somebody who has gone through it before and has a little bit of capability in that area. I don't know how to describe it, but you feel it, you know? We're not simply rational beings. We have like even from a medical perspective, we have all these mirror neurons and stuff where we look at somebody and we can get some sense of what's going on inside and that changes the experience for us. So when you go through this material with somebody that has some experience in it, you go, "Oh." In India there's this wonderful concept called darshan, which just simply means like seeing a holy being and the fact that seeing that being changes you. And I think we have some scientific basis for this, although I think parts of it are beyond our current scientific understanding. But just seeing other beings who have these capabilities internally, you know, does something to you, uh, has the potential at least to do something to you that's beyond the simple description of the stuff that they're doing, if that makes sense. So it does help to go through this material with some people. Okay. So Jay, if you go through the course that's on YouTube, it will go through all of that. And then if you keep coming to this class and so forth, you'll make headway in those. If you want to go a bit deeper, go a bit more hardcore. If you're not part of the school course yet, then jump on the school course because through there and with the help of that community, I can go much deeper, much further down the road with those practices than just the general instruction. And it's a nice way to support what I'm doing here from month to month, week to week, so on and so forth. But I think, Jay, aren't you already like a super bodhisattva ultimate Buddha level member or something? I can't remember. So I'm not just trying to grift you for money or something. You can definitely downgrade on YouTube, but the yeah, the course is a wonderful way to support what I'm doing, and that's where everybody who wants to train a bit more hardcore, I'm directing them there rather than becoming YouTube members and stuff because I'm building something there. The community will support people doing retreat, as you've heard many times. The community supporting each other by asking questions, and all those get parked in one place. And everyone's working hard to learn these techniques. So it's there's a lot more going on than just sort of the material. Yeah, yeah, that's what I thought. Like I said, if you want to hop over there and join that, then just downgrade yourself on YouTube and then jump over there. Uh, that's totally fine. I'd rather have you over there anyway. Uh, yeah. Cool. I missed a question. Methinks. Let's see. What am I missing? What am I missing? Oh, Sasa. Do you observe the fasting days? I do a lot of other stuff. I don't typically follow the fasting days. Sometimes I do some of the holy day things, but uh, quite often quite often I'm involved in some other type of practice at the time that these things come around, and because I don't want to interrupt whatever it is I'm doing with the current round of training or practices that I'm doing. I just continue to focus on what I'm up to. But I think those things are good. I think those things are very good. I've done some pretty. Uh, I've done some fasting things. I've done a fair amount of things. If you hang around at some point, I might talk about them. But as you guys know, I don't like talking too much about what I've actually experienced unless there's a really good reason to do so. Uh, okay. All right. Well, that looks like the end of questions. So we'll wrap it up here for the day. I don't have my special mug, so I'll just say hope to see you guys again soon. Hopefully, I'll be here tomorrow. Cheers.